may or may not know, some of you are aware and some of you aren't. Tammy's brother, Kevin, who we just got reunited with here a while back, he's a martial arts instructor. And so, he and I, we talked kind of a little bit earlier this week. This is something that I have known from before, but I wanted to touch base with him just to kind of make sure. And one of the themes that you find in martial arts is the theme of learning how to respond, not react. And I know some people are like, react, respond, react. What's the difference? Just different words for the same thing. No, it's not. Okay? Reacting is always inferior to responding. And the thing is, when we start talking about reacting, what I think that a lot of us, need to, we kind of understand it as fight, flight, or freeze. And those are three things that are hardwired into us. And the fact is that some people do react to things better than others. We find that some people have better reactions in certain situations or scenarios, and it's hardwired into us. But when I say that, it is excuse me, I need to get a drink real quick. The fight, flight, or freeze, reaction that we have. Imagine for just a second, you and I were out taking a walk in the woods, and suddenly a mountain lion jumps in front of our path, stands there in front of us. You're going to react probably in one of three ways. You are either going to determine that you're going to fight, try to figure out a way to fight the mountain lion, or flight, you're going to run, which, you don't really have to outrun the mountain lion, you just have to outrun me, which is not going to be real tough right now. Or you're going to freeze. You're just going to freeze up, and it's the way that we are. It's the way that we're hardwired, and that's the reason I say though that this is where reacting is always inferior to responding, because that's something that is hardwired into us. But response is something that we have to think about more. And what you find is that whether you're talking about policemen, firefighters, self-defense people, martial arts, even athletes, you will find that they go through and they do a whole lot of practice. They do a whole lot of going through scenarios for that reason, because they want to know how to respond rather than react. Because, and there's kind of even there's kind of a phrase that goes with it, and that is that you want to get a person, the reason you go through all of that is you want, whether it's the game, whether it's the attack, whether it's the event, you want it to slow down. That's the whole goal. Okay? Now, what does that mean? It simply means that reactions are frantic. They are rushed. They are based upon emotions. And when we react, we use a very small portion of our brain. Okay? We're not using logical thought. Whereas when somebody can get, like I said, the game, the attack, the situation, scenario, to slow down and they can respond, then they are using more of their brain and they're making their decisions of how they're going to respond on a logical basis. Good example. When we hear, you see in the movies, there's always, a car goes over the bridge and it ends up in the water. Do you know why most people, not all, but why most people die in that scenario? Because they react rather than responding. Because the first thing when the car hits the water is that you immediately start doing everything frantically to get out, trying to get out, and you freak out. Trying to push the door, trying to shove the door. When the fact of the matter is that until the car fills with water and the pressure equalizes, there's no way you're getting that car door open. And so when we react, that frantic emergency reaction is to try and break everything, to push, to pull. We use all of our energy. Whereas if we have been trained, if we learn to respond, then we know that there is an opportunity for escape that is going to come. Now, if you looked at the front of your bulletin, you figured out that we are in Romans chapter 12. And you're thinking, what in the world do martial arts, sinking cars, and not being overcome by evil have to do with each other? And I'm glad you asked. But honestly, it goes to this scenario that we're talking about. And Paul's telling us, don't react, respond. Don't react, respond. And real quick, how many of you have been to a wedding where you have seen or you have heard, I was going to make a react versus respond joke there, but it just didn't seem right. No, how many of you have been to a wedding where they quote 1 Corinthians 13, the great love chapter? Okay, love is patient, love is kind, and we have all those. If you have been here many times at all, you know, and what I have said is that description of love that's not like flowery, instinctive, stars in your eyes love. The love that Paul lays out in 1 Corinthians 13 is hard work response love. It is a choice that we make. And I'm not talking about attraction, and then getting butterflies and feeling all ooey gooey. Love in that way, that is a reaction to another person. And isn't that how we normally think of love? We think of love as we fall in love. We fall in love with this person, and it's a reaction to them. When the fact is that as we really look at it, love, as the Bible defines love, and as love should be, is what? Love is a choice. Love is a decision. It is a response that we make. It's an action. Okay? And so, Paul, we talk about that in mind, but he's talking here about love. He really lays out, as we start in this chapter, we're going to be in chapter 12, verse 9 is where we're going to begin. And Paul kind of does what he did at the beginning when he said that we should offer our lives as living sacrifices. He gives us the benchmark. He gives us what we should be aiming at. And then once he's given us that, he kind of comes back and he starts talking about how it is that we can apply this into our lives in a concrete, visible, physical, tangible manner. And so he says in chapter 12, verse 9, starts off and says, love must be sincere. Hate what is evil, cling to what is good. So there's the charge, that is the benchmark, okay? That's the standard that we are supposed to be aiming at, is that love is to be sincere, hate what is evil, cling to what is good. And then he's going to roll in, and now he's going to start telling us how to apply that, giving us some ways to apply that in our lives. And he starts applying that standard, and we really look at two different groups of people that we run into in our lives. Okay? The first one, he is talking about fellow Christians, fellow believers, people that members of the body. And this kind of goes back to something we talked about last week, that we may not all have the same gifts, we may not all do the same things, we may not all be in the same situation and in the same place, but we are all should be aspiring to the same thing, to the same goals, and we are all members of the same body. And what we need to understand is that when you're talking about the body of Christ and using the illustration of a human body, the circulatory system of the Christian body is love. That's what should course through the entire body. That is what makes everything work. And so that's where, Paul starts off here, and he says that love must be sincere. And I know that's kind of it's a difficult concept. I don't think any of us, when we start thinking about the way that we love other people, I don't think anybody thinks that they're not doing it in a sincere or authentic manner. I think we all believe that we are. But what we've got to, is that Paul really kind of lays out and gives us some practical thoughts to kind of evaluate that. Where he says, love must be sincere. Hate what is evil. Cling to what is good. And then he says, be devoted to one another in brotherly love. And what is brotherly love? Well, he tells us. He says, honor one another above yourselves. Never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor, serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer. Share with God's people who are in need. Practice hospitality. He even continues on. He says, bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Mourn with those who mourn. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Do not be conceited. And so what he's sitting here telling us is that brotherly love is love that is humble. Well, brotherly love is love that is zealous, that is passionate, that does not give up. Okay? Brotherly love is love that is patient, it is faithful, it is hospitable, It is empathetic. It is sympathetic. It is generous. That's what brotherly love is. And that's what he's laying out for us. And I was studying this, and as I was thinking back that I have found almost the same attributes defined in another way by the Apostle Paul writing to another church. And I know you're thinking, yeah, Jeff, you just told us about it. It's 1 Corinthians 13, the great love you have, love is patient, love is kind, it is not rude, it is not, and that's true. But there's another place as well, and that is in Galatians when Paul lays out the fruit of the Holy Spirit. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Brotherly love. I was thinking about this. When we, as Christians, and this is not just in our church, this is in our homes as well, this is with people that we love and that we care about. When we are devoted to one another in brotherly love, and in that love that we are called to, what we see is we see the attributes of the fruit of the Holy Spirit being acted out in our lives. We see ourselves loving each other. How? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. That we see those two melding together. And it's interesting that here we find it in Romans, we find it in 1 Corinthians, and we find Paul writing about it in Galatians as well when he is talking about love. We need to understand that love in that way, it is a decision, okay? And the reason I say that this is a decision, we go back to reacting versus responding. Because reactions, let's be honest, reactions are fraught with peril. Reactions focus on emotion. Reactions focus on the crisis of the moment. Reactions are frantic. And they're made with a very small portion of our brain, and they're not made logically. But responses, on the other hand, are. And this is where we come back to, being how we're hardwired. We are trained at a very early age, and like I said, it's built into our DNA to react in certain ways. Okay? And if you don't believe me, and you think that sharing and generosity are hardwired into every human being, go spend 15 minutes at a toddler daycare.
Amen.
And you will learn very quickly that is not the case. Humility is not hardwired into us. There is a reason that patience is a virtue, because it's not hardwired into us. It is a response that we make. It is something that we learn and that we grow into. And the fact is that if we are going to love one another in brotherly love, we have got to make a conscious decision. And that conscious decision is that instead of reacting in frustration and impatience, that we are going to learn to respond with patience and forgiveness and grace. That it is a conscious decision on our part of deciding ahead of time, before it ever happens, that we are going to respond. When opportunities arise to share, to be generous, to be hospitable to others, that we are going to respond with an open hand instead of clenching a fist around our stuff. That is a conscious decision that we make ahead of time, because human nature is to hold on a little bit tighter. But that's not what we are being told to do. We are told to share. We are told to be generous. We are told to be hospitable. And I think that's why it's time that we learn to respond rather than react. And we got to make those decisions ahead of time. I was thinking about a lot of times, a lot of this goes with training as well, but like your great athletes or anybody, what they do, one of the things that they do is that they visualize. And what I mean is that they will spend time playing the game in their head. They will play different scenarios or different situations in their head. And they will watch how it'll play out, good and bad. And they learn from that. But it's visualization, and it's starting to see it, because when you do that, then you're making decisions ahead of time. That in this case, I'm not going to, but I'm actually going to do this. And it's the reason, like I said, whether you're talking about, police officers, whether you're talking about firefighters, it's the reason that training, military, comes into such a big role because you're making those decisions ahead of time. That in this situation, this is how I will respond. It is the reason you start talking to self-defense experts. You know what they'll tell you? When you walk into a room, you need to figure out your first and your second way of exit. You need to figure out your points of cover, your points of protection. I mean, that's what you've got to do. You figure it out ahead of time. Because the fact is that when the moment happens, what do? You freak out. You're not thinking. You react. And like I said, it's a small portion of your brain. But if you have prepared ahead of time, then your response is different. And so that's what we need to learn how to do in our relationship with church members, with members of the body, but also at home. We need to determine how we're going to respond to the people that we love and care about. How are we going to respond in a loving manner when this happens or when that happens? How are we going to respond when this situation arises? That is a conscious decision that we make ahead of time. And that is what Paul is calling us to do, to learn to not react, but instead to respond in a way that we should. And then he goes into the second group of people. In verse 17, he says, do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everybody. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Do not take revenge, my friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, it is mine to avenge. I will repay, says the Lord. On the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. And like I said, it would appear here that Paul is no longer talking to us about fellow believers and people in our household. Though could be. But it's those that we see as non-believers, maybe outsiders, those that a lot of times we classify as our enemies, but I think we've talked many, many times, they're not our enemy, they are victims of our enemy. But how do we respond to them? How are we going to respond to them? And I know that we read this and I think we instinctively kind of understand at first. We're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But let's be honest, this is a whole lot harder to apply in our lives, isn't it? It is a whole lot more difficult to learn. You know, Paul said, do not repay anyone evil for evil. Peter, he was writing and he said, don't repay evil with evil or insult with insult. And that's not natural. You might ever watch What Would You Do? You were saying with John Quinones. Mm-hmm. I like to say his name too. I was watching one, and I still remember it. They had set up this scenario where basically there was a kid, he was in a restaurant, and he was being bullied by other kids. So they got these other kids that come around and they start bullying and they're picking on him, and the whole idea is that you got adults sitting around to see how they would respond. And you did. You had some that intervened, you had some that just ignored it. It was kind of weird, what you saw. And they got hidden cameras that are up and they're filming all of this. But there was this one couple and I still remember, because this couple sat there and their solution was they were going to bully the bullies. And so they turn it around and so they take where you have got, you've got kids that are picking on and making fun of this other kid, and so their answer is, well, by golly, we're just going to pick on and make fun of these other kids. And I know that at first that sounds like, well, yeah, that'll teach them a lesson. You know the lesson that it taught? It taught the kid that was getting picked on to learn how to repay evil for evil, to trade insult for insult, to fight back the way the world says to fight back, instead of responding in the right way. That's what it was teaching them. And so, we look at this because it is so much easier to fight back the way that the world tells us to fight back. That's instinctive. It's hardwired into us. But I love this when Paul says, number one, he says not to repay evil with evil. We're talking about, the right response here. But he says to be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everybody. And the word that the Apostle Paul uses for right is a word that he uses in other places, in his other writings, and it is translated at other times as noble, good, honorable, okay? And so what he's saying is here that you are to doing what is right in the eyes of everyone. It's not a case of doing what everybody else is doing, okay? It is doing what is right, what is honorable, what is noble, whatever is good in the eyes of everyone. So like I said, it's not doing what everybody else is doing. It's doing what everyone else will recognize as being the right, good, honorable, noble thing to do. That's how we are called to respond. And that's the difference between a reaction and a response. Reacting is what? Reacting says hit back. And hit back as hard, if not harder, than they hit you. Reacting says to jump right back in it. When they call you a name, you call them a name. That's what reacting says. But that's not what we're called to do. That's not what we're told to do. We are told to respond instead. Chances are, every one of us in this room at one point or another, you've had somebody that has either told lies about you, that has started rumors about you, they may have lied to you, calling you things that you're not, calling you names, saying things about you. Chances are we've all had somebody do that to us, haven't we? And what is the first, what's our desire? Our desire right off the bat is to just react by yelling right back at them. No, I'm not! Isn't it? Yeah. That we want to... That or we want to start, by golly, I'll teach you. You said I did this. Well, guess what? Does anybody know that you did this? Do they know about? I heard. Isn't that where we want to go? Man, we jump right back in there. We're just like, oh, yeah, I'm going to teach you a lesson. We start spreading rumors about them. We spread lies about them. We want to make sure that everybody knows how bad of a person they are. Adelaide Stevenson said, he who slings mud generally loses ground. Question is, what should we do though? So if we're not going to jump back into the fray, if we're not going to just retaliate like that and react, what should we do? And I think a lot of it depends on what we've done before. Peter puts it this way in 1 Peter 2:12. He says, live such good lives among the pagans that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us. Is that the reaction that most of us have? That's why we got to think about our response ahead of time. In Romans 12:18, one of my favorite verses, Paul says, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Now, is it always possible to live at peace with everyone? No, it's not. Okay, there are some people who they are going to say things about you, say things to you, they're going to attack you, they're going to pursue you, they're going to persecute you, and it doesn't matter what you do, they are going to continue to come at. We don't live in a perfect world. Hey, we could all, why can't we all just get along? But this is not a perfect world. And there are some people that we're not going to be able to get along with. And the thing is, though, that we read that, and I think that we kind of skip here. We say, if it is possible, live at peace with everyone. And it sounds good, doesn't it? Except we're like missing a really big chunk there. Because Paul says, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. If it is possible, as far as it depends on Jeff, live at peace with everyone. See, that's different. Because even though there are people that you are not going to be able to live at peace with, you should not be the one that is causing dissension. That's the key. Don't be the source of the dissension. If you're not going to get along with somebody, don't let it be because of what you do. One of my commentaries I was reading, I love this. There is a difference between sharing in the offense of the cross and being an offensive Christian. There are times when people will treat us differently because of who we are, because of what we believe, because of what we put our faith in, because of the way we walk, the way we talk. But if we were honest, I think we would have to admit that many times when we don't get along with people, when we are attacked sometimes, often it's because we are not truly exhibiting love and compassion and empathy as Christians as we should. That's why we need to learn how to respond rather than react. And I think the first goal in that is what and Paul gives us this. He says it exactly of what we're supposed to do. That he says, it's mine to avenge. He says, don't take revenge, my friends. It's God's job to repay. I was reading a leadership devotion the other day, and it was talking about Job. And for about 40 chapters, Job endures his three friends, cursing him and telling him everything that he's done wrong. What a lowlife he is, and how this is all his fault. And then you get to the end of it, and God speaks, and God expresses his displeasure at Job's friends. And wouldn't it have been a great opportunity for Job to stand up and say, told you so? And how many of us would have stood, I told you? Wouldn't we? But see, it's not our job. That's not our responsibility. It is not our job to defend or to avenge God. It's not our jobs to avenge ourselves. My dad taught me a long time ago that he said there are times when you have to trust in the fact that those who know you best know that that's not who you are. Meaning it is your character, it is your integrity, it's the way that you have lived before. And so many times we want to jump into the fray and we want to defend ourselves and we want to make it right. We want to let everybody know how good of a person we are. And what God is saying, you know what? I got it. I'm going to fight your battle for you. I will handle this. And I'm not saying that you got to be a doormat. I'm not saying that you got to believe the things that everybody says about you. But what I am saying is that if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you. The thing is that reacting is taking retaliation and revenge. Whereas responding is learning to offer grace and forgiveness. Reacting is to play the same game that everybody else is playing. Response is to refuse to play games and to act by principle. Reacting is to be guided by emotions, whereas responding is to be guided by your values. Reacting is to be no better than anybody else, but responsive is to live a standard above merely human standards. And that's what we are called to do. That's what we're called to be. And that's really what it looks like. We go back to the beginning of this chapter. That's what it means to offer our bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to the Lord. That's what it means to be transformed by the renewing of our minds, to see things differently. That's what it means to surrender our will to God's will, to make what is important to Him important to us. And we need to learn how to respond. We've all seen movies, and the world and Hollywood have tried to sell us this lie. They make revenge look so glamorous, don't they? There's all kinds of movies out there, and the law-abiding citizen whose wife or kids, they're murdered, they're abducted, they're whatever, and then nothing ever happens, and they have to go out and take it on themselves because the person is let go, and so they're just consumed by this rage and this revenge to go get the person who attacked their family and the DA that worked out, did a plea deal, and so they're going to make everybody pay. And we sit there, what do? We applaud them as the victim. Oh my goodness, you had to take it into your own hands. You had to take justice into your own hands. Because they make it look so appealing, so attractive. But you know what they never show at the end of the movies? Because here's the deal. At the end of the movie, The guy always seems to go back to what's left of his family and live happily ever after. You know, or they get to go back to their old life, or they get to sail away on a ship, or what they don't show is the people that are just consumed by their lust for revenge. What they don't show are the people that go to prison. What they don't show are the people that lose everything because they couldn't forgive and let one thing go. Because the world wants to tell us that revenge and retaliation is the way to go. God says no. No. You need to learn how to respond. And here's the thing for us, is this is where we need to learn how to react and respond. Because I will tell you there's a secret. Charles Barkley learned it many years ago. Charles Barkley was in a Nike commercial, and his exact phrase was, "I'm not a role model." Everybody's heard the phrase, haven't they? And it's plastered everywhere. And Charles got beat up pretty well because everybody said, "Yes, you are." And the thing is, see, here's what's happened. Here is what happens when you and I learn how to respond instead of react. It is a powerful witness because of what it tells the world around us. When we learn how to respond with patience, with grace, and forgiveness, instead of reacting with rage and anger and retaliation, it is a witness to those that are around us. And we think of witnessing so many times as going out and standing on a stage or singing songs and telling people about Jesus. No. People are watching how you respond to the same situations they're going through. You know, there's a new, it's really a trend, but you're seeing it some, and it's called stress interviews. Now, I read an article about this, but it's becoming to where they bring people in for interviews, and then they just put them under exorbitant amounts of stress. Whether it's giving them a test that they have to do in a short period of time, or being confrontational, being angry, saying things about them, whatever else. And the whole idea is because I want to see how they're going to respond under immense pressure and stress. And I'm not agreeing with it at all. Okay, I'm not saying that, but it's just that it's out there. Because the fact is that in the same way, your neighbors are looking at you to see how you respond under stress. Your coworkers are looking at you to see how you're going to react when things don't go your way, when there is a tough day, when things don't go right. They're watching you. Just like they do. Or we can respond the way that God tells us to respond. And as a result, we witness, we testify to them that there is a better way than the world's way.